Hi,
Hi, how are you, Porya?
I'm fine. How are you?
Am I pronouncing that right, Porya?
Yeah, that was great. Thank you.
What's the derivation of the name? Where are you from originally?
I'm from Iran, so it's a
You're
Persian name.
on.
Yeah.
Oh, that's very interesting. That's wonderful. I spent a lot of time in the Middle East.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Well, it was when I was doing leadership training, and actually, I was doing it mostly for Muslim executives, mostly for executives from Saudi Arabia. That was where most of it. But we did meetings all over the Middle East, all the way from Lebanon, Tunisia,
Oh,
Kuwait,
interesting.
Bahrain,
Wow,
all those places.
nice. I thought I'll just give a quick introduction before we start, in case some people might not be as familiar with your work as me. So you produce some of the most famous games in computer game history, including Pitfall II, Ghostbusters, the Hacker games, I believe, Hacker and Hacker 2, while you were at Activision. You created a very famous game, Solitaire Royale, which we'll get into with more details. But I guess my first question is, how did you become the first game producer? Because I was reading the Wikipedia page on video game producer, and it said Activision hired you in 1983, I believe, as a
No,
producer.
actually hired me in 1980, maybe 80, almost
Oh, 80.
1981, right?
Okay. Someone needs to edit that Wikipedia page then.
Yeah,
But
I was hired as the director of training and development to begin with, and then in '83 is when I became producer of computer software. That happened in '83. Activision was the first company to think about having computer game producers. Prior to that, all of the games companies thought of themselves as technological companies, and technological companies use project managers. Well, Activision was the first one that said, we're really an entertainment company. And as an entertainment company, we need producers, not project managers. So what they had done was they had made a long list of the characteristics that they needed for a producer. And as the in charge of training development for the company, I was given this list and I was told that I should be on the lookout for somebody who had these characteristics. And about a year after I was given that list, I was flying back from LA, and I looked at the list one more time, and all of a sudden, the list looked really familiar. And so I went in and saw my boss, Ken Coleman, who was a phenomenal executive, one of the top executives, I think, in the games industry. And he was vice president of personnel at that time, ultimately became vice president of product development. And I said to Ken, I think I found your producer, Ken. And he said, really, do I know him? And I said, yeah, it's me. I seem to fit every one of those characteristics. So anyhow, I grabbed the list and he looked at it and he said, I'll talk to you tomorrow. So the next day he called me into his office and it says, you start Monday, first video game producer. And that's how I got it. And truth, Porya, am I pronouncing your name right, by the
yeah,
way?
yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
So the truth, Porya, was that I didn't know anything about programming. And I knew nothing about game development, but I had no doubt that I could do the job. That's a
Wow.
lot of chutzpah, you might say.
Yeah.
I had no doubt that I would be able to do the job, and I caught on really quickly. Of course, my feeling is any intelligent person can do any job in America. 95% of the jobs in America after a month. I really think. Well, anyhow. So anyhow, that's how I became the first video game producer.
Did you play games at that time? I mean, what kind of games were out there? I'm
Oh,
guessing Pong was one of the games that was out there, like one of the first games. But was there any game that you played or?
well, yeah, I played Pong. Pong was very first done in a I think I can't remember the name of it was a bar in Sunnyvale, California, and that bar was a mile from my house. And so I was playing the original Pong machine, the very first Pong machine that was put into a bar, and it broke down. I don't know if you know the story, but the
I
machine
don't.
broke down, and the bar
Oh,
owner called the guy, "Come get this machine. It's broken." And when they went in to get the machine, it wasn't broken. It was jammed full of quarters. It just wouldn't take another quarter.
oh, wow.
And that was the beginning of Pong, and then Activision went on, and of course we know pretty much that history.
Actually, can you explain what is a game producer? Like, what would you do as a producer? What is your job? Like, what is your daily routine? Is it like a lot of calls and meetings with developers? Do you get to hang out with artists, or what would a producer do?
Well, the first thing a producer does is to listen to what the game ideas are. This was very early in the process. So the people who we hired all had game ideas. And so what we needed to do as a producer was to try to filter out the ones that we thought had the best opportunity for success. And I was a gamer. I always loved games. In fact, I had a watch. I was working for a big department store chain in California, and I had a watch with a game on it. And my boss said to me one time, "You can't wear that watch. That doesn't have enough class. That's a game watch. Our executives don't wear game watches." And so I was a gamer from the very beginning. I just loved games, and I had a good sense of what would sell and what wouldn't sell, and what would be successful. Plus, there's another secret in game development. You always get a first playable. That's the most important thing. If the first playable isn't exciting, if the first playable doesn't grab people, then the game's going to fail. And so we always made sure that if the first playable didn't work, then the game went bye-bye. We didn't even bother to go on, because there was just no way you're going to fix that. So anyhow, the main thing was to find the right people. This is what I told Ken Coleman when I left. He asked me how I was so successful. Every game that I produced shipped, and all of them were successful. And Ken said, when I left the company to start my own company, "How did you do this? How did you do this?" And right off the top of my head, I said, you find the right people, you show them how good you are, how good they are, and then you get out of their way. And that's pretty much the way that I lived. And I had a great advantage for you. I didn't know anything about computer programming. So all of my programmers knew that I depended on them. They knew that I wouldn't step in and tell them how to program. They knew that I trusted them. And that was really a great advantage. I think in my opinion, there's a great disadvantage to believe that the guy who's managing the team has to know as much as the team knows. In fact, Ken Coleman, when I did my second book on leadership, Ken wrote the foreword to it. And Ken told me in that conversation, as I was talking about that, he said, "Brad, I never understood leadership." He said, "I heard you, I saw you talk a lot, and I know what you were saying, but I never understood it until," and I said, "Until when?" "Until I didn't know as much as the people I was managing. Then I understood leadership." So that's the way it works. And the other thing you have to have is you've got to have a sense of when things are going right and when they're going wrong. You just got to have that sense. And you got to know when something is off so that you can straighten it out right away. And I seemed to have that sixth sense to know when something was off. In fact, I had one of my top programmers tell me once, he said, "Brad, you have all kinds of suggestions on how we should do things." He said, we almost never do what you tell us to do, but almost always what you tell us leads us down the right track. So that's the kind of way. It isn't the fact that you're going to tell them what to do, but if you can lead them down the right track, lead them on the right path, then you're really ahead. And that's how it worked for me. So that's just how I did it. I just found the right people, found the right product, and then let them go ahead and do their job.
So finding the right people, how would you choose? I mean, that's, I guess, one of the most challenging things to decide who is right for the job.
I have a couple of good examples. Number one was I got a call from Ken's wife, Karita Coleman. I got a call from his wife, and there's a guy I think you ought to meet. He's really interesting, and he's at Stanford University. So I gave the guy a call, and we made an appointment to meet at Stanford that afternoon. So I drove over to Stanford, and he came up. He was in a wheelchair, but we had a great conversation. But there was no doubt he was interested in educational product, and we were interested in games. So there's no way we were going to do anything. But I always, when I have spot somebody that I like, I always say to them, a programmer I like, if you ever have a game idea, contact me. 3 weeks before Christmas, he contacts me. No, 3 days before Christmas, he contacts me. And he says, "Brad, I got a game I want to show you." This was just before the Consumer Electronics Show. That's our big thing. I had almost no time at all. And I told him, I've only got Christmas Eve morning. He says, perfect. Come by the house on Christmas Eve morning. So I drove over to his house, met his wife, Dorothy, not his wife, his mother, Dorothy. He was a young guy, met his mother, Dorothy, and he showed me the stack of mahjong tiles that were built like a turtle. And he says, that's the turtle. He says, it's a real popular game in China, but they have to build the stack every single time when they want to play it. He said, I thought that it would be a great idea if I could do a computer program that would automatically build the stack. And so he said, I decided to do that. And I did it for Play-Doh. And at that point, Dorothy interrupted and she said, you know, Brad, Brody was a gymnast at Stanford and he broke his neck on the trampoline. He has no control over anything below his neck. And he said he decided to do that program also to prove that he was still valuable and that he could still do what he wanted to do, love to do, and that was computer programming. So he said, and it turned out to be the most successful game on Play-Doh. I don't know if you ever heard of Play-Doh, but it was a big online thing way back then. We're talking 1982, 1983. So anyhow, then he brought it up on his Mac. He said, so I decided to do it on the Macintosh. He brought it up on his Mac, and there was this gorgeous product in black and white, absolutely beautiful. Graphics were out of this world. Now that's one of the hints. Number one, is the person a finisher? Well, when he shows me a completed product, he's a finisher. Does he do good work? When the graphics he shows you is absolutely gorgeous, you know he's going to do good work. Okay. And he showed me the graphics. Then he said, come over. And so he showed me how to play the game. And I said, you know, I love it. I think this has got a chance, but I'm going to have to take it back to Activision to show it to a few people. He says, you have to sign a non-disclosure. And I said, no problem. He said, Mom, bring me my stick. Now listen to this, Porya. She brought a stick with a mouthpiece. This was 83. There was nothing electronic to work the computer. No voice, no electronics, no nothing.
Oh, he used that to control the computer?
He used the stick to do the keys.
Wow.
But it wasn't the non-disclosure. It was all the artwork and all the programming to do both the Play-Doh version and the Mac version. I was awestruck when you could think about not only the fact that he'd learned how to do it, but imagine the commitment for him to learn to do that. When he'd broken his neck and his entire life was, most people would say, was destroyed. So anyhow, I took it back, and the first person I showed it to was my wife. She hated games. I said, do me a favor, just play this for 15 minutes and see what you like. I gave her 8 o'clock in the evening. At midnight, I went to bed, and she said, I'll be there in a minute. At 5, I woke up. This really touches me. I'm sorry. At 5, I woke up. She wasn't there. I called and said, Kathy, this is my first wife. I said, Kathy. And she said, oh, just one more game. 8 o'clock at night till 5 in the morning. I figured we might do something. I went back into work. I had an associate that I worked with named Sam Nelson. I gave a gift to Sam Nelson. I said, take it home this weekend and see what you and Paula think of it. So he took it home. He comes to work on Monday morning. He says, Brad, can I borrow your Mac? And I said, why do you want to borrow my Mac? You have one of your own. He says, Paula wouldn't bring it in. She wanted to play that game. And I knew we had a hit, a phenomenal hit. I wanted to call it Addiction, but the marketing department said Shanghai, which was a much better name for it. But they put addiction in the marketing. And every reviewer in America set out to prove it wasn't addicting. And every reviewer in America said, damn it, it was. It was addicting. So anyhow, that's how I met Brody, and he went on and did another program with us. But he went on to do software consulting for the rest of his life. He's alive today, living on his own in Hawaii. Now, I say on his own. He has to have people to feed him, to do everything, because he can do nothing below his neck. But he's made a phenomenal success out of his life. The royalties he made from Shanghai, I'm sure, were very happy. He was very happy to have, and he had a tremendous success. But I got to tell you one more thing: the day this is along the same question line. The
Yeah.
day that you asked that I shipped the IBM version of Ishido, not Ishido, of Shanghai, the day I shipped the IBM version of Shanghai, I received a disc in the mail. I put the disc into my computer and I saw a version of Shanghai better than we were shipping that day. And I called the kid up and I said, tell me about this. He said, well, I worked he says, I'm a sophomore in Colorado State or the University of Colorado. And he said, I worked in a software store during the summer and I saw Shanghai and I said, I wanted to play it on my Mac, on my PC. So I programmed the version. I thought you might want to see it. And I said, yeah, you're right. I wanted to see it, but it was too late. One day too late. We shipped our version. But I can tell you what my lawyers said. My lawyer said, you can't show that to anybody.
Because you were shipping the other game.
Yeah, we didn't want him shipping that product. And he said, oh, I won't do it. I won't do it. And I said, but I want to tell you one thing, Mike. His name was Mike Sandage. I want to stay in touch.
Mm.
And so I stayed in touch. So that's how I met Mike Sandage. And
Wow.
he went on to become my key programmer in my own company, my key PC programmer. And then I got over the transom while I was at Activision. Now, you know what over the transom means?
No.
Over the transom means that you just receive a game that you didn't ask for, and it's just a surprise, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So I get this little game, a little Mac game over the transom. Now it was a little game. It wasn't a game we could play.
I'm sorry. You mean a game that is already released, or
No. This is one a kid programmed, and he wanted to know if we'd like to license it and sell it.
Oh, like a demo or some sort.
Yeah. Well, you could say it was a demo. That was a good idea. It was a demo. He was trying to convince me to license his game and sell it.
Right.
It was too simple. We couldn't do it. But the Mac programming was the best I'd ever seen. Everything was so clean and so beautiful. I called the kid up. I said, we're not going to be able to market this, but I want to stay in touch because I think I'm going to get a game that I'd like you to do for me. And he said, I'd love to stay in touch. So anyhow, and he became my key Mac programmer when I started my own company. All right. Now, Ian's story, his name was Ian Gilman. Ian's story is phenomenal.
That's after you left Activision.
After I left now I've left Activision.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And this is like in the 90s or?
No, I left Activision in 87. So I left Activision. I'm starting my own company, right? And we did Solitaire. And I called Mike Sandage, and Mike Sandage did Solitaire Royale for us. But Brody did the Mac version of Solitaire. And my brother did the color art for Solitaire. Okay. And that was how we did the Mac version. Then later on, I got a chance to do a product called the Ishido. Michael Feinberg, who I worked with at Activision, had always wanted to do his own game design. And he teamed up with a team, and he produced his game design for them. And they said, we don't want to do this game. So he was so angry with them that he knocked on my door one day. And I opened the door and he said, Brad, this is yours. And he handed me a disc. And he handed me a piece of paper. And I said, what is it? It's a scenario for a game that I know would be great, but my team won't do it. I want you to have it. So I read the scenario and I loved it. Okay. I really liked it a lot.
That was Solitaire?
That was Ishido. That was Ishido. So I did Ishido. It was big in Japan. Okay. It was big in Japan, but it wasn't big in America. We didn't have good marketing in America. But anyhow, so he handed me Ishido and I like it a lot. So I called Ian Gilman up. I knew Mike Sandage would do the PC version. I called Ian Gilman up and I said, I got a game here I think would be perfect for you. If I'm able to license it, would you like to do the programming? Absolutely. All right. So I ended up licensing it to Epix. Do you remember Epix games? Long time ago.
Yes, of course.
So I licensed it to Epix. Joe Miller was the VP of product development for Epix. So we're having a meeting where we're getting ready to make the deal. And he says to me, Brad, he says, who's going to do the PC? I said, Mike Sandage. Oh, good. Because he knew Solitaire, right? I said, yeah, that's good. Who's going to do the Mac? Ian Gilman. Well, who's Ian Gilman? Well, he's a great Mac programmer that I really like, and he's going to do the Mac. Well, how many products has he done? Well, he hasn't done any products yet. How old is he? Well, I don't know, 16, 17, maybe 18. He said, where does he live? I said, in an island off of Seattle. And then he looks at me, he says, Brad, are you telling me that a 17-year-old kid who's never done a program and lives in an island off of Seattle is going to do our lead product for Christmas? You understand that when you have at that time when you had a menu game, which Ishido, like Shanghai, is a menu game, that you do it first on the Mac, because
what do you mean by a menu game?
It works by menus. You pull menus down to do selections. You're so used to menus, you do Windows, right?
Yes, of course.
So you know what menus are.
Normal menus as
yeah, but they didn't have menus in the PC at that time. It was before Windows. They didn't have any menus.
Ah, okay.
And so you always did the Mac version first, and then the PC programmer would then copy the Mac version. All right. So the Mac version ended up being the lead product. Okay. Mm-hmm. And he says, there is no way a 16-year-old, 17-year-old kid living on an island off of Seattle that's never done a game before is going to do our lead product for Christmas. And I said, there's no way he's not going to do it. There's no way he's going to do it. There's no way. So we went on and on for half an hour.
And you were in California yourself, right? You were not in Seattle.
This was in California, right? This was in Silicon Valley.
I guess at that time, the option of working remote and things like that was not even possible with internet at that time.
Oh, but I'd already worked. Half of my programmers at Activision were remote.
Oh, they did work remote.
Yeah, I had a lot of remote programmers at Activision. All right, because I was doing more products than I had a team that could do it. So I had to get outside programmers.
Yeah.
So I was used to working remote. But he didn't like the idea that he lived on an island out of Seattle, and he was young, and he'd never done any product.
Right.
But finally, he said he saw that I was adamant. So he said, "I'll make a deal with you. If you can have him down here this Friday, so he can be interviewed by my programming staff, and if they pass him, then he can do the product." And I said, "Okay, deal." So I go home. Now I got a problem for you. I'm a little tiny developer. It would have cost me $2,000 to $3,000 to bring Ian down,
like fly him over and
fly him and pay his hotels and meal, $2,000 to $3,000 minimum.
Yeah,
we didn't have that money. All right. Now a normal manager, a normal person would have called Ian up and said it's not going to work. Right. I'm not a normal person. I called Ian up and said, we got a deal to do Ishido, but I got a problem. He says, what's the problem? Now, I'm going to tell you, this is going to sound like a story. This is the truth.
Okay.
He says, what's your problem? I said, I need to have you come down here so that the programming staff at Epix can interview you. And without that, they're not going to approve you. And I said, I don't know how to get you down here. And he said, well, my girlfriend went on a trip to San Francisco on the radio last night, and we're coming down this Thursday. Is that okay?
Oh, how lucky.
Talk about having the support of nature.
Right. So
he came down and he flew through the interview. All right. So we're having dinner. I got to tell you the rest of this story. We're having dinner. Yeah. All right. And I say to him, how old are you? He said, 17. And I said, is this interrupting your high school? He said, I don't go to high school. I said, you dropped out? I said, did you drop out of junior high? I didn't go to junior high. Ian, when did you drop out of school? In the 4th grade. I said, in the 4th, what happened? I went to my mom and dad and I said, I don't like the way the teacher's teaching me. You come and tell the teacher how to teach me. And my mom and dad said, again, truth, because I met the mom and dad, do you think you can do better by yourself? And I told them, yes. And they said, okay, you're in charge of your own education from now on. You have to attend the library at least one day a week. He said, I signed the deal. From that moment on, I educated myself like Abraham Lincoln did. In this day and age, he wasn't homeschooling. He wasn't homeschooled. He was self-taught. All right. So I said to him, I said, well, that's great. Then I gave him the write-up, right? Now, this is a scenario. I said, this isn't a technical document. This is just a basic scenario, all right? I don't want you to touch this thing until I get some money, all right? Don't touch it. He says, Brad, I got to touch it. He says, I got to look at it. I can't not look at it. And I said, Ian, let me say it another way. Whatever you do, if I don't get money, you don't get paid. Oh, I understand that. That's no deal. That's no problem at all. All right. So, okay. So I gave him I'm talking about a 10-page scenario. I'm talking about a technical document.
And that was for which game?
For Ishido. Ishido was a sibling of Shanghai.
Ah, okay.
Instead of taking the tiles off the board, you put the tiles on the board. And you got points depending upon how you put them on the board. Phenomenal game. In Japan, not only did they do the game as a computer game, but they actually created in Japan a regular board game of it.
Like an actual game.
Yeah, and the music for Ishido was released as a separate record in Japan. That's how big the product was in Japan. But anyhow, 1 week later, Poria, 1 week later, I get a call from Joe. Brad, come and see me. So I sat down in his office. I said, what's up, Joe? He says, this contract negotiations take too long. I have to have this for Christmas. What do I need? What has to happen in order for me to have this product get started now? You know what this means. And he looked at me, handed me an envelope. I opened it up. There was a check for $50,000.
Oh, wow.
I said, looks like we can get started. So I'm getting ready to leave his office. Wait a minute, Brad, you can't go yet. And I said, what's up? I want first playable in a month. I said, Joe, I got a 17-year-old kid who lives in an island off of Seattle who's never done a product before, and you want first playable in a month? And he says, get the hell out of my office. So I go home and I said, Ian, I got good news and I don't know, maybe bad news. He says, what's the good news? I said, we made the deal. I got money. We can get started. He says, what's the bad news? I said, I need first playable in a month. He says, oh, I'm playing it already.
He already made the game?
He was already playing it. He already had first playable 1 week.
Wow. I
said, send me first playable. I got to take a look at it. He sent it to me. I want to tell you, Poria, remember I told you this guy sent me the slickest Mac game I'd ever seen?
So actually, let's talk about that. How did he know you? Like, how would he send you the demo? Like,
because I was
Activision, or
I was well known as the top producer for Activision.
Oh, so he sent it to your
people.
Office
Yeah, people knew who I was, and if they wanted to send a game to, if they called Activision and said, "Who can I talk to?" or "Who can I send a game to?" it was always Brad Fregger.
I see.
Okay, so that's how. So I got the game. So anyhow, I have to say it was phenomenal. The game Ishido, you can get it now. If you got a Mac, all you have to do is go to iangilman.com, and he gives it away for free. And it is a phenomenal product.
So he still has a running website.
Yeah, he has a running website, iangilman.com or gilman.com. But yeah, so that's how I found Ian. That's how I found Ian Gilman. And Ian, as I said, was for almost a decade, was my chief Mac programmer. Mike Sandage was my chief PC programmer. And then Brody, we did the beginning. And then I had a lot of, like I told you, I had a lot of other programmers, especially when I was at Activision. But if I found out somebody wasn't a finisher, or I found out somebody really didn't know what they were doing, and to the extent that I demanded, I just told them, we're going to have to move on. Because
how would you know that in the beginning if someone is a finisher? You would give them tests, or like smaller tasks?
No, I have a strong intuition. Okay. And when I'm interviewing somebody, I can tell if they're what I'm looking for, and especially if there was a finisher. I just had a call from Stephen Balcom, who was another one of my programmers later on, and Stephen said, we were talking about the past. And he said, Brad, remember Tom so and so? I said, not particularly. He said, well, he came and applied for a job when we were at Epics, and you came out of the office after interviewing me and said, we're not hiring this guy. And I said, why? And I said, I thought he was great. And I said, he's not a finisher. And I said, what do you mean he's not a finisher? He's not a finisher. He'll drive us crazy. And he says, and we were talking like 10 years, well, more than 10 years later, 15 years later. He says, you know what? We've kept track of him. He's not a finisher. So somehow, after talking to him, I could tell if they were what we were looking for. And then we had massive training. When we wanted to test somebody, we would put them in front of all of our programmers, and the programmers just throw ideas and puzzles at them, and see how much they knew about programming. And so we understood if somebody knew what they were talking about really quickly. But like I said, almost everybody that I suggested didn't have a problem.
I see. So you mentioned Solitaire, and I want to talk about something really quick. I was looking at your book, Lucky That Way, which I have a signed copy. Thank you for that. And the foreword of the book is wrote by Orson Scott Card, which is one of the most famous science fiction writers. I want to get into how you got him to write the foreword, but I'm just going to read some part of this foreword that he says, in fact, Solitaire Royale was so well designed and was written with such rock solid code that it is now the oldest game still playable on our computers at home. So he still plays that game at his home. And he mentions that that's because of the non-copyright issue that the game had. But first, I wanted to get into how you met him and how you got him to write the foreword for your book.
That's kind of a great story. Michael Feinberg had an idea for another product called Heaven and Earth. It's called Heaven and Earth. And so we have the same programming staff. Michael Feinberg was a part of the team. Mike Sandage was a part of the team. Ian Gillan was part of the team. And then we added Mark Ferrari and Scott Kim to be part of the team. The idea of Heaven and Earth was going to be the finest puzzle game ever developed in the history of computer gaming. Now, I want to tell you, there still has not been a game that touches Heaven and Earth. It's still the finest puzzle game in history. But we're in my home having a team meeting designing the game, and Sandage, remember I told you I have intuition?
Yeah.
What's going on? And I noticed that Sandage was twitching. Okay. I said, Sandage, you're not with us. You're twitching. What's up?
You mean I was like nervous or?
He was nervous. Like it wasn't Sandy. He wasn't exactly what I wanted to see right then. It wasn't exactly what I was used to seeing right then. And I always check. So I said, you seem to be a little bit out of sorts here. What's going on? Orson Scott Card's going to give us book signing at downtown at the Sunnyvale, California bookstore. And I want to get his signature. Well, Orson Scott Card was the god author for computer gamers. As I think you know. Computer gamers loved Orson Scott Card. There was no doubt we were all on our feet and running to our cars within 2 seconds after Mike Sandage said that. All of us wanted a signed copy of Orson Scott Card's latest book. We get to the bookstore, and literally, Poria, the line is all the way from the front door all the way around to the back of the store to his desk, which is by the front door, and he's signing books. So we all get in line, and it's going fairly fast. And about halfway through the line, Scott Kim, who is the puzzle master for Scientific American, that's how big he was. He says, I'm going to give him an inversion. Now, you've probably never heard of inversions, but an inversion is where Scott Kim writes a name so that when you turn the paper over, it's still the name. So it's unbelievable. And you know how he does it? He writes the name, but when you turn it over, it's still the name. Imagine the mind you have to do that.
Yeah.
So while we're standing in line, he writes, didn't take him long, writes Orson Scott Card, right? So I get up, I'm first in line, signs my book, then Scott Kim is next in line, and Scott Kim hands him his name on a piece of paper. And he looks up at Scott Kim like, that's my name. I know my name. Why are you handing my name? So I reached over and turned the paper over.
And it was the
There's
same
his
name.
And he said, did you do this? And I said, he is it. He's the scientific American puzzle genius. He is inversion. He says, how long did this take you? A couple hours? I said, he did it while he was standing in line. And he said, can you do one for my kids?
Wow.
I said, sure. So then, now remember, he got this big line waiting. Scott then does it for both of his kids. When he got finished, the line applauded. The whole line applauded. And so anyhow, Orson Scott Card is blown away, right? So Mike Sandage is next. So he looks at Mike Sandage and says, and what do you do? And I said, he programmed Solitaire Royale. What? That's my favorite game. So anyhow.
As he mentions in the book.
That's how we met Orson Scott Card, right?
Mm.
So anyhow, but it was quite a few years later, and I finished Lucky That Way. And Barbie, my current wife, Barbie says, you done? I said, yeah. Well, not quite. She said, what do you got missing? I need a foreword. She says, if you could have anybody in the world, who would you have? And I said, Orson Scott Card. Write him. And I said, Orson Scott Card, I don't even know how to get in touch with him. What do you mean, write him? Oh, you're Mr. Positive, because that's I am Mr. Positive. Oh, Mr. Positive, you don't think you can get in touch with him? I'm surprised. So I said, all right, you got me. So I went up and I found his website, and he had a comment section, place where people could comment. I said, I wrote him a little note, and I said, maybe you remember me. You were at a book signing in Sunnyvale, California, and there was Scott Kim and Mike Sandage, who did Solitaire Royale. And I just finished my book, and I wonder if you're interested in doing the forward. And then I shut the computer down, went to Barbie and said, okay, now we're never going to hear anything. Got up the next morning. Please send me your book. I'd love to do the forward.
Wow.
I sent him the book, and then he wrote that 26-page forward.
Yeah, it was really long. I was looking at it.
I've never known a forward that long. And he ripped Microsoft up one side and down the other.
That's what I wanted to ask you next. He mentions that Microsoft is Satan, I believe, at one point in the forward. I think he uses the word Satan. So if you want, we can get into that.
Well, Microsoft is Satan. Bill Gates is Satan, actually. Bill Gates never did anything. Bill Gates stole MS-DOS from DR-DOS.
What was DR-DOS?
DR-DOS was the very first DOS operating system, disk operating system. They were in Monterey. He was up in Seattle. IBM came to him and said, we need this operating system. He says, I don't have one. He says, where can we get one? He says, you can go to see DR-DOS down in Monterey. He says, okay. So they went down to Monterey, and the guy that it was owned by a husband and wife, the company, Digital Research. This was Digital Research, Mountain View, California. But it was owned by a husband and wife. The husband was out flying his plane, so the wife took the meeting with IBM. They wanted a better price than she normally gave everybody else, because they're big stuff and they're going to do a whole lot of units. All right. She was adamant. Nobody gets a better price. They got angry, left, went back up to Gates and said to Gates, we need a disk operating system. Is there any way you can get us a disk operating system in 30 days? We need one. He said, let me see. So he went to Seattle Computing. Now, Seattle Computing and Microsoft were beta sites for DR-DOS. So they had the beta copy of DR-DOS, both of them. So he goes to them and he offers them a deal. If you can get me an operating system in 30 days, I'll give you 50 grand flat, no royalties. Now, that's the truth. So they gave him a disk operating system in 30 days, and he gave them 50 grand, and that was it. And then he sold that. He changed it. He called it MS-DOS, and he gave it, and he licensed it to IBM, and that's how he made his millions. All right.
But that sounds like a fair. I mean, he paid for it and he bought the product. Or
MS-DOS was exactly the same as DR-DOS. This is what I think happened. Now this is my opinion. I have no facts, but I know Bill Gates. Bill Gates goes to Seattle Computing. We got a chance to make a lot of money. I just need a disk operating system in 30 days. We can't do a disk operating in 30 days. Yes, you can. you got DR-DOS. Go in and change the copyright, change the name to MS-DOS, and we're set. I think that's what they did. And I was deep into computer programming at this time, and I can tell you that DR-DOS operated exactly the same as MS-DOS, but it didn't have the same bugs because Microsoft couldn't correct any bugs. They didn't do the programming, and Seattle Computer didn't do the programming. There was no way they could get into that operating system and fix anything. But DR-DOS could fix the bugs that they found. So I think they stole it. Now, the guy that did Seattle Computing, he refused to talk about it to anybody. He would not talk about it to anybody. He just took the 50 grand and he went down deep. And then Microsoft tells the story that I told first of all, that they bought it from Seattle Computing, and that's how we got MS-DOS. And I think he's an absolute crook. I'll give you another example. I had a good friend who was the vice president of CD-ROM technology for Microsoft. And he invited me up to take a look at the CD-ROM to his organization that he had built in Microsoft. So I went up there and we went through everything, showed me his whole organization, the products they were doing and everything. And then he said, I want to show you something. This was before Windows was released. This was when Windows was so top secret that the Microsoft people had never seen it.
Yeah.
He says, would you like to see Windows? I said, what do you mean would I like to? Of course I'd like to see Windows. Come to with me. He took me into his private office, brought up Windows, then left and locked the door. Have fun. It was a perfect clone of the Macintosh. Perfect clone. In fact, how it was developed is written in a book called Barbarians, led by Bill Gates, where the guy who headed Windows project says that Bill Gates stole it from Macintosh. It was absolutely a perfect clone. Because what happened was Microsoft was a beta site for Macintosh. So when he was going to do Windows, he made a deal with Steve Jobs that he would separate these two groups. He would separate the Mac development group from the Windows group. He promised Gates that. He put them next door to each other. And he would go into talk to this guy who wrote Barbarians led by Bill Gates, and he says, go over and see what they're doing over the Mac. Go over and take a look at this. Go over and take a look at this. He wanted to clone Macintosh because he knew that Macintosh knew how to do it best. Okay. And I saw that clone. It was absolute, right down to the wastebasket. I saw that clone. And I went outside and I said to my friend, I said to him, he said, what'd you think of Windows? I said, it's the Macintosh. It's Windows. I said, come on, it's the Macintosh. He said, well, it's playing on a PC. He stole Windows. He stole MS-DOS.
How come he didn't get sued by Apple at that time? Like Steve Jobs?
He did get sued by Jobs, and he had to change a couple things. And one of the things he had to change was the wastebasket, the trash can. But ultimately, he was able to do Windows. In my opinion, he's a crook, a liar, a thief, a crook. That's my opinion of Gates. Well, I should say that he almost bankrupted me. Gates. They had promised me. They had come to me and asked me to do a solitaire game for them.
Microsoft came to your company?
Microsoft came to me and said, we want to do a solitaire game, and we want you to do it because you're the solitaire king.
Because you made the Solitaire Royale.
Yeah. So anyhow, I went up there and we said, we're going to do a contract. We're all set. And I'll let you know. That was the year that they did the Consumer Electronics Show in Seattle. So I went there and I met with the guy, and he says, well, the contracts aren't quite ready yet. And I said, really? What's going on? I'll get in touch. Turned out he was moved to another division. Another guy came in. I heard from friends that I have in Microsoft. Another guy came into the games division, saw the contracts for Solitaire. He says, I don't know, do some stupid solitaire game, and he threw it in the wastebasket. And I wrote Gates. I said, we had a letter of intent. We had a strong letter of intent. I had everything. I wrote Gates, and I said, look, not only do we have a letter of intent, but my aunt and uncle played bridge with your mom and dad when you were a little baby. I said, come on, treat me fair here. Never heard from him.
You mean your
Never heard
parents knew each
from him.
other?
My aunt and uncle were in the same bridge club as his mother and father.
Oh.
And Bill Gates was running around in diapers when they were playing bridge. Like I said, I'd already spent 50 grand developing the product because I had a letter of intent.
And they didn't buy it.
They never contacted me. Never said we're canceling a contract. Never heard from them. Never heard a word from them.
Mm.
But luckily, the Solitaire Royale people, Phil Adam from Solitaire Royale, had moved to Southern California. I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of that company he went to, but he wanted to do a couple more Solitaire games, so he did 2 more Solitaire games, and he covered my costs on. He took the game that I was developing for Microsoft, and they marketed it. So I came out okay, but I made a few $1,000. If I'd have done Solitaire for Microsoft, I'd have been a billionaire, because Microsoft owned, they owned the franchise essentially, because everybody had Microsoft computers and they were all playing Solitaire, Microsoft Solitaire. And if he'd put out a game, it would have sold billions of copies. So I do have some anger. So I want to be absolutely open and transparent about the fact that I have some personal anger with Bill Gates.
I wanted to get back to the years you were at the Activision. I believe Activision had also a relationship with Atari at that time.
Well, we were doing Atari games. I mean, all of our games played on the 2600.
Right. So what?
It was a critical relationship.
Yeah. So what led you to leave Activision, and what was that like?
I left Activision. I got upset with a decision the president made, and I realized that decision was something I couldn't live with. So I told, and then I was talking to two best friends, and I said, I think I'm going to have to leave Activision. And they said to me, well, what would you do if you had your choice? I said, start my own company, but I can do that. And they said, we'll start it with you. They had money. And so the wife worked with me, and then the husband did all my finances. Within a couple of years, the husband had left he was working for Intel. He was executive. He was an executive for Intel, but he quit Intel and came to work for us, for our own company. But anyhow, so they said, let's start a company. Let's start a software company. We believe in you. So I went back to Ken and I said, things aren't going to work out here. Do
you want to share that decision or?
Okay, what happened was I checked one time and I was producing 80% of the product and 80% of the profits for Activision, my products.
The games.
My game. And I met with Ken. I think we were at some sort of an industry meeting. Ken invited me up to his hotel room. He said, Brad, I wanted to make you a vice president. But Levy said, I don't want Brad to be a vice president. He's not strong enough. I wanted to be like, and he named this guy that I disliked intensely. Another producer who I didn't like. I thought he was a blowhard and an idiot. I didn't like him. And Jim Levy told Ken Coleman that he wouldn't make me a vice president until I was more like this other guy. And I said to Ken, I'm producing most of the product. I'm producing most of the product profits. And he wants me to be more like that jerk.
What did they want you to do to be more like that other person?
He said I didn't stand up enough for my product. I was too agreeable with what was going on. That's how I operate. I operate because I make friends. That's how I get things done, right? He saw it as a weakness. Jim Levy was not too smart. He saw it as a weakness, okay? And anyhow, so 2 or 3 days later, we got back to Mountain View, and Ken called me into his office. He said, Brad, I can understand how you feel. I'll tell you what we're going to do. He says, you deserve the pay of a vice president. We're going to make you an Activision fellow, the first fellow in the computer games industry. And I said, well, what does that mean? That means that you're going to get the pay of a vice president, and you're going to have carte blanche. You can make any product you want, and we will give you the money to make that product, no questions asked. And I said, well, that sounds like a good deal.
Yeah.
But 3 weeks later, gave my notice.
Oh, it did.
And I started my own company.
Oh, so when did you join Atari? Was that before that you started
No,
your own company?
I started Atari. I had become known as one of the top training and development directors in America. Okay. I started out with a company called Mervin's, and I turned Mervin's into the finest training development department in America. And not only that, I had also been in charge of the videotape division, training videos and in-store videos. I was in charge of all of that. And in addition to all the training and development in the stores. And I had done a phenomenal training program with a company, with one of the top training companies, that they were doing supervisory training, but what was in manufacturing. So anyhow, I went to the owner of this company, and I said to him, I should have wrote his name down. I didn't write it down. And I said to him, I want to license your product. He said, well, license it. Why don't you just buy it? And I said, I want to license it because I can't use your videos. And he says, why can't you use my videos? So your videos are using manufacturing people. I have to use, these are supervisors that work in retail. I have to show them in retail situations. I can't show them in manufacturing situations. He says, you think you can produce videos? You duplicate all of my videos and all of my materials? And I said, yeah, no doubt about it. So he said, okay, we'll license it to you. Anyhow, he was blown away with the product we ended up with, okay? About a year later, he got a call from Atari. And Atari said, I'm Vice President of Atari. We want to do your program. We want to make sure we got the best. Who's the best person in America that I can hire to do your program here at Atari? And of course, he said, Brad Fregger. So I went and talked to the guy at Atari. And an interesting thing, remember my Game Watch story? So I had this great meeting. He said, Brad, we want to hire you. We're going to hire you. But I have one more question. I said, what is it? Where did you get that watch? I love that watch. And I knew I'd come home. So then I was in charge of director of training development for Atari Corporation.
How long was that?
Not very long, 18 months.
Why so short?
Well, I don't put up with bullshit. And I told my boss's boss that he was a bullshitter. He couldn't fire me. I was too successful in the company. I was doing too many good things, but he could make life rough. And I don't like life to be rough. I have fun working. I only work when I'm having fun. So I went to my boss and I said, this isn't working out. I said, and he said, no, you're right. And I said, I think I'll move on. So anyhow, and then I quit, and the company, the training company, they hired me to do some executive introductions to his program. I did a couple for him. And then I got a call from Activision, and they said they heard about me and they want to talk to me to become their training manager. So that's how I got to Activision. And
then Atari ran into some problems after a few years, I believe. I think that was after you left, right? Yeah, it was after I left. That was the problem. I left. No, I'm kidding. Anyhow, one of the first things I had to do when I was at Activision, my boss said, you need to talk to the sales VP. We need to do sales training. The sales have just gone through the bottom, and we need to do some sales training. So I said, I'll go talk to the VP and see what's going on. So I went over and talked to the vice president of sales, and I said, what's the deal here? He said, Brad, I want you to take a trip with me. I said, where to? Southern California. I want you to see the problem. So I took a trip to him to Southern California. Now this time the big customer, the big retailer for the video game industry at this time was record stores. I don't know if you knew that or not, but it was record stores. Like you directly sold to record stores at that time. It was record stores. That's where people went to get their Atari music product and their Activision product. You mean the record stores that also sold music? Yeah. They were the big retailers for Atari products at that time. Okay. So anyhow, he took me down there. He took me to 7 record stores. Every single one, Porya, had boxes of Raiders of the Lost Ark and E.T. stacked to the ceiling. I thought E.T. was very infamous at that time, like very disliked by critics. Oh, E.T. was the worst game ever developed by a major manufacturer. But you have to understand, Atari owned the market.
When a
Mm.
company owns the market, people don't buy product. They are assigned product.
Oh, interesting.
So Atari told all the retailers, this is how much product you're going to take.
Mm.
And the head of Atari was a rug manufacturer. He didn't know shit, if I can say that.
Sure.
And so marketing told him how many they could sell of ET. This was when ET came out. And he said, double it. So he forced them to double the shipments to every retail store carrying the product in America. The retail stores had no choice. They had to take the product. And they still had leftover Raiders of the Lost Ark, which came out first. All right. So I said, now, maybe you don't know, but I spent 20 years in retailing before I ever did this. I was a store manager for department stores. I was a retailer and a buyer.
Before you get into the computer game
Before I got
industry.
into the computer industry, right?
Right.
Retailer and a buyer. I understood retailing. I understood Atari. I think I'm the only person in the world that knows what went wrong, because I've read review after review and they're all wrong. Very simple. And I said it to one of these store managers. Your open to buy is dead. He said, deader than a doornail. See, the way retailers work is you have an open to buy for a line of products. You buy that open to buy, you have that open to buy, and then you
What do you mean
sell
by
that
open to buy? Is that what you said?
It's a retail term, open to buy. How
What is
much
it?
product you can buy, how much money you can spend buying product to sell in your store.
Okay.
All right. So that's the open to buy, is how much money you have to spend.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So they didn't have any open to buy. They could not spend a penny on video games because all their money was tied up in stock they couldn't sell. And on top of it all, Atari refused to take a single unit back, and there was no open to buy. That ended the business. That ended the business. That ended the whole business. They not only couldn't they buy Atari product, they couldn't buy Activision product. They couldn't buy any product. The open to buy was dead. And all they had to do to save that, all they had to do, if they had any brains at all, and they didn't, all they had to do was take back the merchandise, free up the open to buy, bury the merchandise in a dump in New Mexico, like they did a lot of stuff they weren't able to sell, but bury it all. It would cost them a lot of money, but it wouldn't have killed the industry and it wouldn't have killed them. It killed the total video game industry for 2.5 years.
Because Atari was the main seller of the games.
Yeah, but it killed our business too, killed Activision's business too. And who brought it back?
Who was that?
Nintendo.
Oh, with Mario.
But it took them 2.5 years to bring it back. Now we switched as fast as we could. We switched to computer games, C64 and Apple.
Commodore,
Commodore and Apple. We switched to the computer games as quick as we could. But it was hard for us, and we had to lay people off. It was a tough situation. We laid people off, and the newspapers came and interviewed the people laid off. They said, "You must be really angry you got laid off." They said, "We're not angry. This is the most fantastic company I ever worked for. We're just sorry we can't work here anymore. But if we could work here, we would." So that was because Atari was a great company to work for. It was really a great company to work for.
Good days.
So anyhow, that's my Atari. That's the truth about what sunk Atari.
So I want to switch gear a little bit to back when you were at Activision, and I know you were producing Pitfall II, which I saw some of your interviews talking about the Easter eggs for Pitfall II. Like, do you know any other Easter games that you made during your time in Activision or your own company?
Easter egg games?
Well, Easter eggs in other games. Yeah.
Well, when I was working for a company called Eclipse Entertainment, and they were out of Austin, Texas, and the owner of that was a guy by the name of David Stafford. So what happened was David Stafford was working with Mike Sandage, and they started a company and they did the first pinball game. And then they moved to Austin, Texas, because the tax situation was better than it was in California. And they had done a contract with Accolade. Do you remember Accolade? To do the Jack Nicklaus golf games. They'd done a contract with, Accolade to do the Jack Nicklaus golf games.
Which
But
you were also a producer of, right?
yeah, they had been purchased by Maxis. Okay, they'd been purchased by Maxis, but they had to finish this product for Accolade because they'd done a contract for the product, and the product wasn't getting done. So they called me and they said, Brad, come to Austin, tell us why we can't finish this product. So I went, and it was obvious they couldn't finish it because they had a producer that didn't know what he was doing. You know, some people are really stupid. They think that plan drives the product. The plan does not drive the product, Porya.
The product drives.
The product drives the plan.
Yeah.
And if you think the plan drives the product's never going to get finished. All right. So I said, you got the wrong guy. I said, okay, we got the wrong guy. Why don't you move to Austin, become our vice president of product development, and finish the product for us? So I said I would. It was kind of a good timing for me because I was getting a divorce. So I was able to leave California and start a whole new life in Austin, Texas. All right. So first thing they do is introduce me to Dennis Clark. And Dennis Clark was the physics guy on it. And he went and he showed me the physics of the golf ball. And I want to tell you, he knew the physics of the golf ball better than anybody at MIT. He knew exactly how that golf ball would react, how it was hit by the club. Phenomenal physics of the golf ball. Unbelievable. We got near the end of the game and the golf ball wouldn't go in the hole. The golf ball would bounce out of the hole. But I said, Dennis, the golf ball's got to go in the hole. The golf ball wouldn't go in the hole. I said, Dennis, this is a video game. Put the ball in the top hole. But he wouldn't. He knew he had absolute perfect physics and he was stubborn. All right. And I got written up as a stupid producer in magazines because I had told him, put the ball in the damn hole. Right. 2 days later, he comes to my office. I figured it out. What did you do? He says, I took the cup and I moved it down 2 inches. And now the golf ball goes in the hole. Oh, God. So there was a producer, Scratch Golfer was the producer at Accolade. The guy I worked with at Accolade, we were kind of a team, all right? So he was the guy at Accolade. So I called him up, his name Mike Franco. I called Mike up. I said, Mike, we solved the problem. Thank God. Boy, it took you a long time to solve that problem. I said, well, we've solved it now. He said, how did you solve it? I said, he just put the cup 2 inches down in the hole and there was dead silence. And I said, Mike, are you there? Yeah, I'm here. What's going on, Mike? I forgot to tell you to put the cup 2 inches down in the hole. Regular golf course, they put the cup 2 inches down in the hole. That's how they made sure the golf ball went in when they putted.
Wow.
His physics were perfect. So anyhow, after we did that, then some of us left and started another company, and that was Eclipse Entertainment. We did have a major problem at Eclipse Entertainment. We were doing Jack Nicklaus 5 at Eclipse Entertainment. And Jack Nicklaus 4 had a 3D golf course. I don't know if you know, they were able to make 3D golf courses. I don't know if you know how they did it. They would put cameras on the wings of an airplane, and they would fly over the airplane, and the wings and the cameras would then actually tell you exactly where all the hills were, where all the walkway paths were, where all the greens were. So you actually got the golf course, the basics of the golf course. You got the golf course. You didn't have any of the foliage, but you have the basic golf course. But we didn't have a 3D golfer. So that meant, like with Jack 4, if you wanted a distance shot of the golfer hitting the ball, you had to create a small golfer. A medium shot, a medium golfer, a close shot, a big golfer. But if you could have a 3D golfer, you didn't have to worry about any of that. The golfer would just fit into the program like it was part of it. So we decided with Jack 5, we were going to have a 3D golfer. So I spent some time in Los Angeles with one of the best 3D emulated people. That was where they put silver gloves on their clothing and they take pictures, and so they developed that. That's how they create all of the game stuff.
They were not like motion capture suits and things like that.
Yeah, motion capture. That motion capture is exactly what I'm talking about. Thank you. So anyhow, we took all the golf shots. So we took the chip, the putt, we took everything. We took all those shots and I took them back, and the drive was a problem. when the golfer hit the driver, the golf ball went through the shoulder. Now, we wanted realistic games. So anyhow, I called the company back. I said, the golf club's going through the shoulder. He says, your programmer doesn't know what he's doing. Well, this was Grant Pimpler was his name. And I knew that he knew it. Remember, I know when somebody's good. I know he knows what he's doing. I said, I'll tell you what, give me the 3 top 3D programmers in America. I'll send them a copy of the golfer and have them put it to it. Send it to 3 of the top 3 that they said in America. 2 of them refused to work on it. They said it was too difficult. And the 3rd one gave me a product that was worse than we were doing. So I went to Grant Pimpler and I said, Grant, you're the best in America. You're going to have to do a workaround. We often had to do workarounds. I don't know if you know that, but computers and everything, they're never perfect. You often have to do workarounds. To do all the spectacular stuff, you have to make things work.
It's like doing tricks all the time, right?
Yeah. So I said, you're going to have to do a workaround. We got to have that golfer bar can't go to the shoulder. 2 days later, he said, Brad, come take a look. The golfer was perfect. Club didn't go through the shoulder. I called the computer company up. What they had to do was they had to rework it. See, the problem was, if you don't know Doom, do you remember Doom?
Of course. One of the first person shooters. One of the first person shooters ever.
Remember how jagged the objects were, how many flat surfaces they had? They weren't regular people. They looked very different from regular people because they could only handle so many pixels. Handle so many pixels. We wanted a golfer that looked like a golfer. We wanted our Jack Nicklaus to look like Jack Nicklaus. We had to have an image that had lots of pixels, many more pixels than they'd ever dealt with. And that was the problem. So they had to redo their software to handle more pixels. We were the ones that pointed that out to them. But now I remember the questions you asked.
What was it?
You asked me if we had any other Easter eggs.
Oh yeah, that was the question, right?
And when we finished Jack Nicklaus 5, we got an invitation to go see Jack Nicklaus and have him look at the game. So Mike Franco and I went to Pebble Beach, California. He was playing in a golf tournament in Pebble Beach. And we knocked on the door where the house he was staying in, and Barbara Nicklaus answered the door.
His wife.
She said, welcome into my house. And she says, Jack couldn't play golf here today, so they flew up to Livermore, California. He's playing golf. He'll be here in a couple hours. Come in and make yourself at home till he gets here. She was the most fantastic woman. While she was talking to us, now she's Jack Nicklaus's wife. Do you have any idea how much money they must have had? While she was talking to us, she was doing the laundry.
Wow. He was
doing a practice game in Livermore, California. So anyhow, 2 or 3 hours later, he shows up. We show him the game. He loved it, went back home. And later on, we were talking to ourselves, we should have an Easter egg. I know a great Easter egg. We'll have somebody that plays perfect golf. And I said, well, who can we have? We can't have Tiger because we can't have a real golfer play perfect golf because Jack Nicklaus would be angry if our Easter egg had a person playing perfect golf was better than him. Who could we have? And I said, all of a sudden, I know who, Barbara Nicklaus.
His wife?
His wife. So we created a perfect golfer. Every shot was perfect. And it was Barbara Nicklaus. And what they had to do, they had to pick out the exact right outfit, have the exact right skill set, and it would become Barbara Nicklaus. And it would play absolutely perfect golf and slaughter everybody. Every shot was everything it could possibly be. Because I don't know if you know how you do this, and I'll tell you how you do it in golf. You have the program. If you want to create a golfer, you have to create a golfer for the players to play against, because most of the time you're not playing online. You are nowadays, but then you're not playing online. So the player has to be playing against somebody. So what you do is you have the golfer, your computer golfer, hit the golf ball. First of all, you have him hit it perfect. That's how come I knew we had a perfect golfer. You have him hit it perfect. Now, of course, we would never use a perfect golfer in the game. So we would ramp him down. See, so we'd say a great golfer or a medium golfer or a poor golfer. So the players out in the world could play whatever level golfer they wanted to play. But you started out with the perfect golfer and then ramped down from there. So we had a perfect golfer. We just needed to name him somebody and make it possible. So that was the big Easter egg.
I want to get back to what you said earlier about the game. You said that the game drives the market, not the other way around, right? Or the game drives the plan, is
The
what you said.
plan, the game drives the plan.
Yeah, but as a producer, how would you know, like in the early stages, what games are successful and what? Because you sit down with developers, I'm guessing, and artists, and there are a lot of ideas floating around.
Well, first of all, I was a gamer. All right.
Right.
So I could understand really quickly whether a game was fun or not as a first playable. I could understand whether a game would be fun or not by looking at the spec, at the scenario, at the description of what the game could be. I could understand if it would be fun or not, and then we would go through, and then you create a plan. You create a plan. You're going to have to develop different parts of the game at different times, so that everything comes out at the right time at the end. But the plan's going to break. For example, I'll give you another example. When we were doing Ishido, all right, we had a plan to do Ishido, and the plan gave me milestone payments. So when I turned in a version of the product, version 1, version 2, version 3, I would then get paid by Epics. They would pay me based upon if we met our plan. So I went to Mike one day and I said, how are we doing? The game's due tomorrow. He said, I know it's due tomorrow. It's going to be different. I said, what? It's not going to be done. He said, why is it not going to be done? It's not going to be done because it turned out that I had to do 3 steps that we had planned this month, in order for the program to work properly when they test it. So that meant I wasn't going to be able to deliver a product on time. So I said, well, so the month after that, what's going on? He said, well, we'll be fine because I would have already done these things this month. So next month, we're just going to be fine. There's not going to be any problem. We'll catch up in everything. I said, okay, I'll take care of it. So I went to Joe. I said, Joe, we got a problem. We're going to need 2 more weeks to give you the disc. 2 more weeks. I said, 2 more weeks.
And Joe was like the marketer, or
he was the vice president of product development. That was Joe Miller. So anyhow, Joe, I said, we're going to need 2 more weeks. I can't get you the PC program on time. He said, well, what's this going to do to our schedule? I said, it's going to be fine because we're doing stuff that we had to do next month. We'll catch up next month. There's not going to be a problem. And he said, damn. I said, I need a favor. So I'm not paying you in advance. I said, Joe, I don't need to be paid in advance, but your finance department always ships my money late. Will you please ask them to ship it right away this time? As soon as I give you the product. 2 weeks later, I hand in the product, and the next day I got my money. I actually ended up getting my money faster than I would have got it if we turned the product in on time. But you see, I had to fit the plan to the product, to the development, because the plan broke. You see what I'm saying? And the plan, but the plan doesn't always break that way. I'm going to give you the truth. I never did a product that I thought would ever work.
So what do you mean?
When we started a product, I knew we were never going to be able to make it work. But I never told my programmers I felt that way.
So you mean it was challenging?
They were too challenging. Remember, in order to do leading edge product, you can't use current computers, because by the time your product shipped, the computers have advanced 1.5 years or 2 years. You have to be ahead of the game always. And how are we going to stay ahead of the game? Never believed it. We always did. We always did. But more than we always did, we always shipped a product better than we designed. Now, if you're following a plan, you never ship a product better than you design. You pick the product you design. So you miss the opportunities to take advantage of new learning, to take advantage of new opportunities. And besides that, you're forcing your people to stay on a schedule that maybe they can't stay on because they've run across things that they can't fix. The plan has to fit the product. The plan can't drive the development. The development has to drive the plan.
Yeah.
And so many people they don't understand that. They think the plan is rock solid set, and that's the way it's going to be.
So you mentioned that you were a gamer back when you started as a producer, right? Are you still playing games? I know you have grandchildren, and I'm sure they play games. Do you play with them or?
No, no, I'm a long way from my grandchildren. When my first grandchildren, the first ones, when I was had my company, I was the big hero. I was, I owned a game company. I was doing games, and that's my granddad.
Yeah.
But later on, I've been out of the business for 20 years, believe it or not. And my current grandchildren and great grandchildren, they're really probably not aware of me, of what I did. But I'm still playing games. I still play solitaire once in a while. I've kind of gotten away from solitaire. You know what my favorite game today is nowadays?
What is it?
Golf Crush. It's a computer golf game, online computer golf game where you play against people all over the world. And
So
it's the best arcade. It's the best arcade golf game I ever saw in my life. Unbelievably fantastic game. Yeah, Golf Clash. Golf Clash.
Golf Clash. Oh, that's what you play.
That's the best. That's the best computer golf game ever. It's an arcade game. It's it's not like Microsoft Golf where you're trying to emulate real golf. But they did fantastic job, and it is truly addicting. It is truly addicting.
I wanted to ask you about if you wanted to give advice to someone who wanted to start in the video game industry, let's say a developer or any role, what would you tell them as an advice?
Well, first thing I would tell them is that they got to know what they're talking about. They got to really know what they're talking about. And it's harder today. It's much easier when an industry just begins. Because
there are less competitions, I guess.
There's less competition, and people don't know everything yet.
Yeah.
And so you come up to date quicker because all the knowledge isn't there. So it's really better. What I tell people, if they want to be successful and they want to have a good time, find something that they love to do in a brand new industry that's just getting started. That's where your best chance to get ahead. Like I told you, I hired Brody. He was quadriplegic. I hired Ian, his 17-year-old. When I was at Eclipse Entertainment, we hired a kid. Well, what happened was we wanted to do 3D product like Doom. And so we were looking for a 3D programmer. So we had gone through MIT, we'd gone through CIT, we'd gone through the University of Texas. We could not find a single programmer that had any idea how to do 3D programming. It's not easy. Movies run at 30 frames per second. A good computer 3D game runs at 50 frames a second. So David Stafford, genius. I already told you he's a genius. He says, Brad, I'm going to go up online and see if I can find any code that interests me. So he went up online and he found this little piece of code, 3D code that he loved. So he called the guy. He wrote a note and said, can I give you a call? The guy gave him his phone number. He called him. His name was John Pollard. He says, John, I saw that little piece of code. Tell me about it. So John explained the code and why he did it. And it was exactly what David wanted to hear. Remember, I told you, if you really know what you're doing, you know what you're doing. You think baseball scouts don't know a good player when they see one? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You think a football scout doesn't know a good football player when he sees one? You're the master of your art. So anyhow, it was exactly what he wanted to see. So he asked him, he was telling him exactly what he wanted to hear. He said, where'd you graduate? I said, Tulsa High School. No. I meant, where'd you go to college? I didn't go to college. Why didn't you go to college? Well, I had a baby really early on and I had to go to work immediately. Where do you work? He says, I work at the Tulsa Walmart. But he loved 3D programming. So he would come home from work, spend some time with the family. When the family went to bed, he would work on 3D programming from 8 until midnight and then get up the next morning at 6 and go to work. And David says, wow, how much they pay you at Walmart? He told him. He said, how would you like to earn twice as much and program all day long? And the guy said,
dream come true.
We're packing the car. John Pollard is one of the top 3D programmers in the world.
Wow.
That's how we found him. I can't tell you how many people I found that turned out to be outstanding, that had no credentials, no education, and no schooling beyond high school. But you know what, Puya?
Yeah.
You know what?
What?
They loved what they were doing.
Passion.
It was in their soul. It was in their being. They had passion. And when I found somebody that had passion and loved what they were doing, and then I saw they were finishers, I knew I had struck gold. I got to give you another little story. We were doing an enterprise software product with another group of programmers. I was doing an enterprise software product, and it was working online, so we had to know Java. We had to know Java in order to do an enterprise software product. So my programmers, these were guys that followed me from another company. People tended to follow me. Okay, they followed me from another company, and he came to me. The director of engineering came to me. He said, "Brad, this is Mike Sandage." Came to me. He said, "Brad, we got a problem." I said, "What's the problem?" I said, "We have to do Java." I said, "What's the problem with that?" "We don't know Java. We've never done Java." "Get the hell out of my office. You get to work and you'll know Java better than anybody else in a month." He left my office. Came in a month later. "Okay, we know Java better than anybody else in the world." I said, "How do you know better than anybody else in the world?" "Because I called the inventor of Java and I started asking him questions and he ended up asking me questions." Now, remember, Java had only existed for 3 years. We're talking brand new, 3 years it existed.
Oh, okay.
So I went to a meeting, an industry meeting, and I was talking about what we were doing. And I mentioned that we were working on Java. So after we're meeting, a guy comes up. I need to find out something from you. I need to find out. We're trying to do Java. We can't find a Java programmer. I said, "What are your requirements?" "Well, we demand that they have 5 years experience in Java."
But it's only been out for 3 days.
I laughed at him. I said, "It's only existed for 3 years. You're never going to find anybody with 5 years experience." But that was the executives in the industry. They didn't know
Sounds like the
nothing.
same executives now when they're hiring.
So anyway, that's another cute little story.
Wow. You also played a role in the game Tetris at some point.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Okay, so here's what happened. All right. I was trying to find people who I could do product for. This was our Software Resources International was our development company, and Publish International was our publishing company. So I was trying to find somebody
after you left Activision, right?
After I left Activision. So I was trying to find customers for Software Resources International. So I went to Broderbund. They were a big game development company. So I went to see Doug Carlston, who was the owner of Broderbund. So I went to see Doug to see if we could do a product. So we sat down and he talked about his process. Well, his process was crazy. He said, first of all, you give him a scenario for nothing. If he likes the scenario, you give him a first playable for nothing. Then after the first playable, he wants to see different versions. Doesn't give you money. Doesn't give you nothing. It was obvious we were not going to do a deal. See?
Yeah.
So I get ready to leave and he says, "Brad, one more thing." He says, "I got a product here that I got from Russia.
Tetris.
My programmers seem to like it, but I don't know. Will you take it back and give me a review of it?" I said, "Sure." So I take it home. I put it in the machine. Poria, I knew in 2 minutes this was going to be one of the biggest games in the world. 2 minutes, I knew.
Wow.
I called Doug Carlston. "License this product now. Don't hesitate. License it now." "Okay, well, I'll think about it anyhow." So anyhow, in the meantime, I had this other group of developers I worked with Gilman Louie was the head of it. I forget what they were called. They ultimately became Spectrum Holobyte. But at this time, they weren't Spectrum Holobyte yet. So I went and saw Gilman Louie and I was talking to him and he said, "Did you see anything new?" I said, "I sure have. I've seen a game from Russia that you've got to see. And I'm telling you right now, you've got to license this product because it's going to be the most successful product in years. I guarantee you."
So it wasn't even published in Russia?
Never been published any place. And as far as I know, it hadn't been published any place in the world.
Oh, so the developer sent you directly, like not you, but sent him.
They sent it to Doug Carlston because they wanted Doug Carlston to do it. And then Doug Carlston gave me a copy of it. So anyhow, I said, "You need to license this product to Gilman Louie." So then the Software Publishers Association, I don't know if you know, the Software Publishers Association was the association. It was like the Motion Picture Association. Every publisher belonged to it, from Microsoft to me. Every publisher, every developer belonged to it. And so they would meet once a year, the Software Publishers Association would meet. So anyhow, I go to the Software Publishers Association meeting. There's Doug Carlson. I say, Doug, I said, have you licensed Tetris yet? He said, well, I've been thinking about it, but I haven't done it yet. I said, you need to license it. He says, okay, we'll go find the developer, because he was there at the Software Publishers Association meeting. And I said,
Oh, so he came to the US.
He came to the
Russia.
US. Right. He came from the US, from Russia. He said, we'll go find him and I'll license the product. I said, great. So we're walking, we turned the corner and there's Gilman Louie. Gilman, he said, Brad, guess what? I said, what? I just licensed Tetris. And the rest is history.
Wow.
So what I say very confidently, that I was the first person in America, if not the world, to know how fantastic that product would turn out to be.
You were one of the first people to even see it.
One of the first person in the world to ever see it. So that's my Tetris story. Now, there's only one sad part to that story.
Oh.
I didn't ask for a finder's fee. I should have asked for a finder's fee.
Do you know Buzz Aldrin?
All right. So here's what happened. Remember I told you that Phil moved down to Southern California, and I did a couple solitaire games for him. Well, I think the first solitaire game I did for him, they were having a big consumer electronics show in LA. He said, Brad, you need to come down and demonstrate solitaire for my people. It's important that you do that. So I went down and I set up my deal, and right next to me was Buzz Aldrin, because they were doing Buzz Aldrin's space game.
I didn't know there was a Buzz Aldrin game.
Yeah, there's a Buzz Aldrin game about flight to the moon or something like that. I forget what they called it. But Buzz Aldrin was right next to me. And so we spent the whole time talking to each other.
In consumer electronics.
Yeah, we didn't talk about it. We talked about space.
Right.
I'm a space nut. We talked about space. I was writing about space when I was 30 years old. I made a speech to the American Astronautical Society at the 10th anniversary of the moon landing. I was really big into space, okay, and societal futures and all that stuff. So anyhow, Buzz and I had a lot in common. And I said, Buzz, I told a story in one of my books that I think you might be interested in. He said, what's the story? I said, well, here, I'll tell it to you. Could I read it to you?
Yeah, of course.
Imagine it's 500 years in the future, and you're in a classroom on a planet orbiting Alpha Centauri. The teacher is doing a section on the history of the human race. She touches a button and a star map hologram appears in the air above the classroom, showing all the stars in the neighborhood of Alpha Centauri. The teacher says, can any one of you point out the star system where humanity originated? You raise your hand. The teacher recognizes you and presses another button. The joystick attached to your chair becomes active, and you use it to control a large arrow floating in the air in front of you. You move the arrow to a point and point at a small star about 4.5 light years from Alpha Centauri. Correct. That is the solar system, the star system that birthed humanity and the star's soul. The teacher then displays a hologram of the solar system and asks you, can you point to the planet from which humanity came? Again, controlling the joystick, you point at a relatively small planet, third from the sun, with an exceptionally large moon for its size. Yes, very good. That is Earth, students, the planet that gave birth to the human race. This touches me, I'm sorry. Planet that gave birth to the human race, the only technological capable species that we've ever found in the galaxy. Then she turns back to you and asks, on which world did humanity first step when we finally escaped Earth's gravity and were able to travel to different worlds? And you point to Earth's moon. Right, one more time. Yes, students, it was a bit over 500 years ago that humanity, specifically Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, first stepped on another world. Then after a moment of reflection, she continues speaking in a very soft, reflected way. I wonder what it was. Sorry, this really touches me. I wonder what it was like to have been alive at this time in the history of the human race. It must have been very exciting to have been there to see the beginning of humanity's evolution into a spacefaring race.
Wow.
So anyhow,
That was
Buzz
awesome.
then, when I got back home, I got a call from Buzz's secretary, and she said, Buzz wants you to write a speech for him. And
Oh,
include,
really?
yeah, and include that story. So I wrote a speech that he gave to the Philips, the international meeting of Philips.
The company Philips?
Yeah, the company Philips, out of, where are they out of? Denmark or Norway or someplace?
It's a Dutch company, actually.
Yeah, they're Dutch. Yeah, that's close enough.
Yeah. Right now, there is a video game awards ceremony happening every year. It's kind of like Oscars, but for video games. But back then, when you were producing video games, there wasn't such a thing, right?
Well, I think it's morphed. I think it's morphed into what you're talking about right now. It was called Excellence in Software Awards back when I was doing it.
Software,
but I think it's still the same company. I think it's published. The Software Publishers Association is still doing it, I believe.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, but you're right. It is like the Oscars. You're exactly right. And
games.
That's what it was like then. And I won the best creativity program for 1988.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah,
was that for one of the games you did, right?
It was a product I produced. It was done by Ivan and Carol Manley. They're the ones that did it. It was called Hometown USA, and it was a way that you could create your own hometown in real life. You could, not big houses, but out of using cardboard and paint and everything, you could actually design and build your own town.
So it was like a simulation game.
Yeah, like a simulation, but you didn't do it on the computer. You actually built these.
Oh, it was like a physical game.
Yeah, physical game. Yeah, you actually built these buildings.
Oh.
And it was, again, really big in Japan. We didn't have the marketing power. The truth is, games are successful because they are marketed well, not because they're well produced. Most important thing is marketing. That is most, and we just never had the marketing power. Our best home run was Solitaire Royale, of course. But even it was a fraction of what it would have been if it had been marketed by a big company.
Right.
So we just never had the marketing power. But I put together a nice campaign for the awards. And then when I was sitting with some Japanese friends, because I had done Solitaire Royale for Japan, right? It was really big in Japan. And so Japanese people wanted to be with me. In Japan, the producer is the hero, not the programmer. The producer is the hero.
Interesting.
So in Japan, I was the hero because I was. So whenever anybody introduced me as he was the I think it was Shanghai was the really big one. He was the producer of Shanghai. He was the producer of Ishido. He was the producer of Solitaire Royale. The Japanese their heads would touch the floor. They bow in respect.
Yeah.
It was phenomenal. So I was sitting with some Japanese friends. This was a luncheon meeting because the Creativity Award was not one of the big awards. So it was a luncheon meeting. And they said, now the award for the top creativity program in 1988, Hometown USA. And the Japanese people went crazy. you Brad. And so that was really kind of fun.
I have one last question, which is about copyright. I know we talked about this a little bit offline, but I know after you created Solitaire, a lot of people created other versions of Solitaire, like different versions. My first part of the question is, does that bother you when you see your game? Because I know that you cannot copyright the mechanics of a game. It's not possible. You can copyright the graphics, the sounds, but the gameplay and mechanics of the game.
You can copyright the code.
Right, but if someone writes their own code, but the mechanic is the same, you cannot have ownership of that.
Well, probably. Yeah, you're right. The mechanics are pretty common. You're right. I would agree with that.
So would that bother you when you see your games being copied without your permission? Or
the only thing I could copyright were the graphics. There was nothing that I could copyright that couldn't be duplicated another way. People can make their own cards. They got plenty of artists who are more than happy to make card decks. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So there was nothing I could copyright, but I was the first person to sell a computer card solitaire game in the world. I invented that genre.
Yeah,
And
and
that
no one
is
can take
the
that away.
most successful genre in the history of computer gaming. Nothing else touches it. And I was the inventor of that genre. I was the designer. That was the only game that I ever produced that I designed. I was the designer of that game as well. Now Mike Sandage did the IBM version and Brody did the Mac version. My brother did the graphics, but I did the design of that product, and I produced that product. All right, and we gave birth to the biggest genre in computer game history. And then I produced Shanghai, which is the second biggest genre almost in the computer game history. How many solitaire mahjong games do you see out there? That's the same genre as solitaire. Solitaire mahjong is the same genre. And I was the producer of that genre and the developer of that genre. I think I'm proud of that. I think that's to be responsible for those two genres, I think is something to be really proud of.
I actually saw your brother's name in Wikipedia. Dennis, I believe is his name, right?
Yeah, he worked with my aunt. That's why he's there. My aunt, okay, you asked for it.
Sure.
My aunt, Joan Shogren, was the one who had the first computer art showing, public showing in the world.
You mean like a
computer art showing?
Like a gallery?
Showing. She had a showing. It was at the San Jose State Bookstore.
Oh.
It was advertised in the San Jose Mercury News. There were stories about it in the San Jose Mercury News, I think 4 or 5 stories about it, and stories in the Spartan Daily, which is the local school newspaper. But it was the first showing of computer art in the world. Joan Shogren did that. Now, Joan Shogren created the first clip art in the world. T-Maker wanted to do the very first product, and they hired my aunt and her team to do the very first. They did the first dozen, I believe, at least half dozen. I don't know how many for sure. Clip art programs in the world. She was a leader in computer art, absolute leader in computer art. And do you know they threw her off Wikipedia?
Oh, she had a Wikipedia page?
A friend of mine had done a Wikipedia page for her, and they
Oh.
threw it off because there was nobody talking about her, and they didn't believe she was a secretary in the chemistry department at San Jose State, and they didn't believe a secretary in the chemistry department, talk about misogynist, secretary in the could come up with this kind of a concept. She stole it from somebody else. And besides that, there's nobody else talking about it on the internet. They ignored 3 newspaper articles announcing the showing, and then later articles talking to her about how she did it. I have all of this up on my website. Go to Fregger.com.
Here we go.
And then go down to papers of exceptional interest. Yeah. And then see Joan Shogren, computer pioneer. And this talks about everything that she did with the computer art. There was spring of 1963 was the very first showing. And then where the newspaper articles, and then I have copies of the newspaper articles. Yeah. And then if you go down further, you'll see the very first click art programs. There's the newspaper articles.
Oh, wow.
I think that one was out of Stanford Daily, right?
1963.
1963, the very first showing of computer art.
Yeah, San Jose, it says.
Yeah. And then if you go down further.
So your brother participated?
My brother worked with her. My brother was an artist, and he was on her team.
Oh, wow.
And then
world's first computer show.
Yeah. And then you go down further, and
computers inventing
art. Go further. We know about this. I want to show you click art. Oh, this is something interesting. That's one of her computer arts was put on an IBM building in San Jose. That's one of her computer arts.
Oh, wow.
That was on an IBM building in San Jose.
That looks amazing.
And then and then first computer click art, Tea Maker. And then if you go down, you'll see some of the first products. That's there to see the first products.
You can see the larger size actually. Click art.
And then there's some of the click art holidays.
Wow.
And then they had all these, like I said, they did the first half dozen or more, I think.
Yeah, these are amazing.
Yeah, so she was really a computer art pioneer. She was total computer, and she's not getting any credit at all. And I tell what Wikipedia, what they, their statement, a secretary couldn't come up with this idea. I mean, what, in this modern day and age, they should be slapped across the face for even making such a statement.
Exactly.
But the pioneer at Wikipedia, the guy that started it, he's calling it a terrible, terrible program now. So political and so biased that they're worthless. That
he's not involved in the.
He's not involved. He left him. He said they're terrible.
Oh, I didn't know that.
One of the founders of Wikipedia.
Oh.
But I found it to be terrible too. You know why they threw me off? They threw me off.
From Wikipedia?
They threw me off.
Oh, why is
everything I've done, because I kept bugging them about Joan Shogren.
Your aunt?
My aunt.
Yeah.
So they found me and they just threw me off.
Oh, so you used to have a Wikipedia page?
I had a big Wikipedia page. I've done all these software programs.
Yeah.
All right. I've edited 60 books, written 15 of my own. I did, I think 12 audiobooks. Working directly with, I worked with Burt Reynolds for 2 days to do his autobiography, and I worked with John Denver for 2 days to do his autobiography, and I worked with the author of Exorcist, as he did Exorcist, as they read Exorcist. I did all those audiobooks, and the author read it. So I met the author of The Exorcist, the author of Flowers for Algernon, Burt Reynolds, John Denver, Buzz Aldrin, on and on. I've had this eclectic career.
Did you ever get to work with your brother again, other than that game that he did?
No, we never worked together again after that. He did that one art project, and that was it.
Okay.
He was a fireman and in Santa Clara, California, so he was busy doing his own things.
Oh, okay. So
you found out more about me than I was planning on telling you.
Well, that was the point of this interview. Do you have anything to share afterwards? Like anything else to add?
The one thing I didn't talk about was I didn't talk about Ed Bogas.
Ed Bogas?
Yeah, Ed Bogas. Ed Bogas is a real famous musical creation person. All right. Oh. He won the Grammy for the music he did for the Peanuts programs. He did all the music for the Peanuts TV shows. When I was at Mervyn's Department Stores, I was in charge of the videotape, I was in charge of the train development and also the videotape program. And they wanted to do my first sale tape, a tape that would show to customers. So they knew that I was good, but they wasn't sure I was that good. So they asked Ed Bogas to come in and work with me. And that's how I met Ed Bogas. And Ed Bogas and I worked together on the scarf demo tape. It was a scarf demo tape for Mervyn's Department Stores. And so I got to know Ed real good. And when I got into Activision, I started using Ed to do music for my programs and stuff. Oh, there you go, Ed Bogas. All right. So we were doing I liked him so much that I called him and I said, this is going to be longer than I meant it to be.
That's fine.
Have you got a few more minutes?
Yeah, I have time.
So here's what happened. The movie is called Labyrinth, and Activision licensed the Labyrinth. Okay.
For a game, you mean?
For a game, right.
So they wanted to make a game adaptation.
Yeah, but the story is a little more complex than that. Oh. They licensed the license to one of the top game developers in Japan. We decided not to do the game. I don't think we ever did the game, but they licensed it to Japan. And the Japan developer was coming to meet with the George Lucas group and the Jim Henson group. So we have all these people that think they know more than anybody else in the world. This is what Ken Coleman told me. We got these guys with these big heads. We got Jim Henson. They think they know more about puppets and stuff than anybody else in the world. We got George Lucas's group, which think they know more about computers and anybody else in the world. And then we got this top Japan software publisher, who thinks they know more than anything else. And they got to come with a game design in a week. And we have to authorize it. Henson has to authorize it. Lucas has to authorize it. And the Japan developer has. They all have to agree on the design, and it's 1 week.
But why would they decide on 1 week? Why not give it more time?
It was just 1 week that we could do the design. They took a lot more time to do the program, but 1 week to do the design.
But
Just
why
the-
not? Why not
just
have
the
more time for
design.
design?
Because I guess these are big companies we're talking about.
Right.
Not Lucas himself, but Lucas's people, Henson's people. They had other things to do.
Oh, okay.
They set aside a week.
Hmm.
Okay. And the guys in Japan set aside a week to come here. All right. So he says to me, we've been talking with everybody in the company, and we think there's only one person that can make this happen. And I said, and who's that? And he says, you. You think I'm the only person that can bring this design together with these big shots in a week? Yeah, we think you're the only guy. I don't even speak Japanese. We got somebody for you. So he said, Tom, come in. So Tom, a guy named Tom Randolph, young kid. He was, I think, a sophomore or junior at San Francisco State. Came into the office, and I said, I met him. Hey, Tom, nice to meet you. I said, you speak Japanese? He said, I speak fluent Japanese and fluent American. And I'm a simultaneous translator. You know what a simultaneous translator is?
Yeah, it's really tough, actually.
He says, I'm a simultaneous. He says, how did you do that? He said, my dad was English. My mother was Japan. We had both English. We were living in Tokyo, in Japan. We had both English friends and Japanese friends. Often they would come together. I was 5 years old. I was translating between the English kids and the Japanese kids at 5 years old. So anyhow, we go to the meeting. It was unbelievable. He would tell me exactly what they were saying while they were talking. But better than that, Porya, he told me what they were thinking. He told me what their body language meant.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
He told me everything. I had a glimpse into the Japanese mind that you wouldn't believe. And I understood the Henson mind and the Lucas mind group, you know. I pulled it off. We got a design in a week. Everybody agreed on it. And I went back and I told Tom Randolph, I want to keep in touch with you. I was in my own big company, right?
Mm-hmm.
Got a call from Tom Randolph. I said, what are you doing, Tom? He says, I'm Fujitsu Limited's person in the United States of America. Wow, that's great. I said, what's up? He says, I want Fujitsu Limited to do Solitaire Royale. And I said, great, that's terrific.
So that game was already published in US, right?
It's already published in US. That's how they found it. And so I said, great, be glad to do that. So of course, now this meant that it was the FM Towns computer. They had a computer called the FM Towns computer. So that meant Mike had to learn the FM Towns computer, right? So he learned it. And of course, as always, we produced a perfect Solitaire Royale for the FM Towns computer, right? And they were delighted with the product, all right? And how did I meet Tom Randolph? He was my translator to solve the other problem. You never know how these things are going to come together.
Yeah.
So anyhow, a couple of years later, I get a call from Tom Randolph. He says, Brad, Sato-san is coming. Now, Sato-san was the director of all entertainment product for Fujitsu Limited. I think he went on to become the chief executive officer for Fujitsu Limited. His name was Sato-san. And he called me Fregger-san, Mr. Sato, Sato-san, Mr. Fregger, Fregger-san. So he said, Sato-san's coming to America. He's only meeting with the top publishers and the top developers in America. And he especially said he wanted to meet with you, this little tiny developer. I said, love to. He said, come to his hotel room, such and such a day. So I took Ed Bogas with me. We went to the hotel room. And I said and I met with Sato-san, and I said, and Sato-san says, Fregger-san, do you have more beautiful products for us? And I said, yes, I do, Sato-san. And he said, what products do you have? I said, I have number one product, Heaven and Earth. It is the most beautiful product you ever saw, and it is the most fantastic puzzle game you ever saw. And I said, and he said, what other product do you have? We have a brand new product calling Ed Bogas's Music Machine. and it is going to be the most beautiful consumer music development product ever developed. People can create their own music, create their own lyrics, print their own music out, and do everything. I don't know, I didn't tell you this, but I did the first consumer music product in the world, music studio at Activision. So I'd already done one music product. I wanted Ed to do the best ever, right?
Mm.
And I knew Ed was right. I knew Mike was right. And Mike knew the FM Towns computer because he did Solitaire Royale. So I knew we knew the computer, right? So we explained to him what Music Machine would be. So then we sat back down on the couch and he looks at me and he says, Fregger-san? I said, yes, Sato-san. He said, will thee be as beautiful as Solitaire Royale? I said, Sato-san, they will be even more beautiful. He says,
Wow.
then we will do them. So that's how what we did at Bogas's, but we ran into trouble. This wasn't over with. This story's not over with.
What trouble?
I made a mistake. When you're working with different cultures, you don't know if you're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
After we did this, we all went out to dinner. Okay, so we had dinner with Tom Randolph, Sato-san, and the rest of my people. We had a beautiful dinner in a restaurant. Then when the people came to do the contract with me, to discuss everything, that the people who worked for Fujitsu Limited, we thought we'd do something really special for them. Diana Aldridge, who was the woman partner, but remember I told you, Dick Aldridge and Diana Aldridge were the two people that started the company with me. And Diana Aldridge was a phenomenal cook. So we would decide that we would give them a phenomenal home-cooked meal.
Mm.
We didn't know that in Japan, a home-cooked meal nowhere near the credibility of a restaurant meal.
Oh, really?
We had dissed them without any knowledge. We had dissed them.
Oh, so in their culture, home cooked meal is not appropriate.
Not appropriate.
Mm.
Not in this kind of a deal. So they decided they were not going to do the contracts for Heaven and Earth and
Wow.
Ed Bogas's Music Machine. I got a no, we're not doing the contracts.
Because of that dinner only?
Because of that dinner only.
Oh my God.
I wrote a letter to Sako-san, and I said, I don't understand. Because in Japan, your word is golden. It ought to be that way in America too. I can tell you that I had more trouble with contracts than I ever had with handshakes. Handshakes always worked out. Contracts, I had more trouble with contracts. So anyhow, I wrote him a letter and I said, I thought we were doing the product. I was just told that you're not doing the product. The next day, Air Express were the contracts. Sato-san got my fax and he Air Expressed the contract. He went to those people and said, we are doing these products. Send him the contracts. And I got him the next day, Air Express. So then we did Heaven and Earth and we did Music Machine. And we did, not only that, we did light versions of both. Heaven and Earth is a very complex product, but at the center of it is this phenomenal selection of games, puzzles, phenomenal selection of puzzles. So we did a light version of Heaven and Earth, which is just the puzzles. And then we did a light version of Ed Bogas's Music Machine, because it again was somewhat complicated. So we did a light version that just allowed you to create music easily and print out the sheet music. That's the word, sheet music, print out the sheet music. So we did those four. We did Ishido with them. And that way I already told you that the music of Ishido was sold separate from the game. Ed Bogas did the music for Ishido. I called Ed Bogas and I said, Ed Bogas, I need nine pieces of music as a theme for each of these steps in Ishido. Mm. All right. Is it possible you could give me those 9 music? He says, can you come tomorrow? He says, I got a studio session tomorrow afternoon. I can probably take care of you. I said, I'll be there. So I went to his studio and he finished up what he was doing. Okay. He said, okay, we're going to do 9 more things. This is what I want to do. Blank, 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 blank. Within an hour, he had created 9 brand new melodies.
Wow.
Full orchestra.
With computers, right? Or
no, he's using musicians. There was a studio. He had piano players, violinists.
Wow.
And he did it on the fly. It's as impressive as Brody programming Shanghai. There are geniuses in the world, Poria. There
And
are
you were
true
lucky to be
geniuses in the
meeting
world.
them.
And I was lucky to find quite a few of them.
Yeah.
So anyhow, that's how we got Ed Bogas's Music Machine. And actually, I was doing a deal with EA. I was getting ready to sign contracts with EA to do American version of Ed Bogas's Music Machine. And guess what happened?
What happened there?
EA decided to go with only sports. They canceled everything else but sports. But Sam Nelson, I told you about Sam Nelson, who took the product home. Remember, took the original Shanghai home to play with his wife, Paula?
Yeah.
He became the top producer at Electronic Arts, the top producer at Electronic Arts. He got a bonus 1 year for $1 million.
Oh, wow.
Probably one of the top producers in the world, next to me, of
That's
course.
a nice bonus. Of course.
Anyhow, boy, I sure told you a lot more than I thought I was going to tell you. You're the one in charge of when the internet's done, so and the interview's done.
If you have anything to add, you can add.
I think I've told everything. Yeah, I think I've said it all.
All right. Well, Brad, it was a pleasure. Thanks again for having me, and thanks again for letting me have you. And this was awesome.
I really enjoyed this. I enjoyed it very, very much. And I had a lot of wonderful years in the computer games industry, and was able to be part of a lot of wonderful products. And I love to tell those stories. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to share some stories.
No problem. Thanks for sharing them. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
All right. Have a good day.
You too. Thank you.